Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down 5 must-add defenses to dominate in week number 2 of the 2024 fantasy football season. We're going to be talking about 5 different defenses that I believe you guys should be looking to pick up off the waiver wire to help you get that edge to win your week in week number 2 based upon the matchups that these defenses have. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into 5 must-add defenses to dominate 50 Shades of Grey style in week number 2 fantasy football. We begin with the best defense to stream for week number 2 of the 2024 fantasy football season, and that is the Los Angeles Chargers at the Carolina Panthers. The Chargers defense is currently rostered in 11% of leagues on Yahoo, 10.6% on ESPN, and 24.8% on NFL. So in a ton of your guys' leagues, you'll be able to mosey on over to the waiver wire and pick up the Los Angeles Chargers defense. Now, the Los Angeles Chargers defense looked amazing up against the Las Vegas Raiders at home in LA this week. The Chargers ended up eating that W, Jameis Winston style, 22-10. The defense got 4 sacks in that game, 1 interception, 2 fumble recoveries, and 10 points allowed. Sure, maybe a lot of that was due to the matchup and due to the fact that Gardner Minshew didn't look very good at all, but the LA Chargers definitely looked good defensively. And again, even if that was a little bit fugazi because it was up against the Raiders, now they get an even easier matchup. The Carolina Panthers offense on Sunday, yesterday, if you're watching today's video on Monday when it comes out, the Panthers offense was absolutely a disgrace to the NFL. Bryce Young was slinging the rock out there like Stevie Wonder attempting to read a defense, and it was hard to watch. The only time you would see the Panthers game on Red Zone is when Derek Carr was slinging back shots their way. It was absolutely a disaster. If you were a Panthers fan, I wouldn't be surprised if you shut that game off 5 minutes into it and went to go watch paint dry or something, because the Panthers offense is down bad. I personally believed that Dave Canales would be able to revive this offense, hit it with a little bit of revive, some quick revive, like you're playing Black Ops Zombies, but instead, that offense was just dead all game. And while I do think Bryce Young isn't a complete and utter bust, and I think Canales will do good things for this offense, the offensive line couldn't stop me, and I think the Chargers defense and offense are going to feast in this game. The Saints defense in week 1 versus the Panthers, they won 47-10. 4 sacks, 2 INTs, 1 fumble recovery, and 10 points allowed. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. It doesn't take Albert Einstein to figure out why you want to be streaming defenses up against the Carolina Panthers offense. So the Los Angeles Chargers are my number 1 defense to stream for week number 2. Now, the Chargers do play the Steelers in Pittsburgh at Heinz Field, or whatever they now call it, because it's no longer Heinz Field. So depending on how the Steelers look this week in week number 2, I think we might be able to stick with the Chargers again, depending on if they make a quarterback change, as well as just how they look, because they looked solid in week 1, but it's not like they won in week 1 up against the Falcons because the offense was putting the Falcons in a figure 4. It was kind of just because the Falcons kind of slept-walked in that game and ended up getting slept ultimately. So next up, we'll move to defense number 2 here, and that is the Seattle Seahawks going up against the New England Patriots. In New England, 43% rostered on Yahoo, 56.1% on ESPN, and 28.2% on NFL. In week number 1, the Seattle Seahawks went up against the Denver Broncos, a defense that I was telling you guys to stream, and guess what? It paid off swimmingly. In that game, the Seattle Seahawks ultimately won 26-20, and while I am someone that believes in Bo Nix did not look good in that game, in my opinion. Now, it's his first ever NFL start, so I'm not here to throw stones at the guy. I'm not here to bury the guy and say it's a guarantee that Bo Nix is a fucking bust of large magnitude in the NFL, right? It was just game 1, but he didn't look that great. So in that game, the Seahawks won 26-20. 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, 1 fumble recovery, and 16 points allowed for the Seahawks defense. And now they go up against an opponent that, in my opinion, is worse than the Denver Broncos. Now, Nick, how can you say the Patriots are worse? They beat the Cincinnati Bengals. Well, the Cincinnati Bengals do this every single year, and we all, as a community, just fucking forget that the Bengals normally get mollywopped in week 1. They come out the gate slow. They come out the gate of the season not looking like themselves, right? A couple weeks into the season, the Bengals will end up as one of the better teams in the NFL. People are going to write them off, but you shouldn't write back. Shout out to Geno Smith. I really do think the Bengals will bounce back. The Bengals defense, though, in that game, even though they lost 10-16 in a very embarrassing fashion, they had 1 sack and 16 points allowed, which to me was pretty shocking because I thought the Bengals defense was going to be all over Jacoby Brissett like white on rice because the offensive line of the Patriots is pretty bad. They have some questionable weapons around there. Now, Ramondre Stevenson basically ate a 5-star meal out there. He went to one of Gordon Ramsay's restaurants in Viva Las Vegas. He was fine dining like that episode of SpongeBob with Squilliam Fancy Son, but the Seahawks will play the Finns, my Finns, in week number 3, and I would not touch them with a 10-foot pole. So we're going to continue with the theme that we also had last week, streaming defenses against the Patriots. I get that it didn't work the best with the Bengals. Now, the Bengals didn't bend you over a table and rinse you if you played them. We just didn't get a great performance, but I do think the Seahawks here will show out as their defense looked great last week. Next up, we move to a defense that is a lot more suspect than the Chargers and the Seahawks. So to me, the Chargers are the best defense to stream. The Seahawks are, right up in that alley, right? They're the clear number 2, right? They're in a tier together. They're both great matchups. I'm excited about it. Now, this third team here, the left hands up, who are we, the Commanders? They have an amazing matchup, a mighty fine matchup up against the New York Football Giants. Daniel Jones is so ass. He is straight ass. Shout out Violet Myers, right? Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes went to Danny Pennies. The guy is dog shit. He is absolutely terrible. But if there was a team to make him look good, it would be the Washington Commanders, who are 1% rostered on Yahoo, 0.9% on ESPN, and 2.3% on NFL. But ultimately, this is what we would call a trust the process play. I am going to trust the process that Daniel Jones is so bad, I wouldn't even wipe my ass with him. So I think the Commanders defense is going to be able to have a great game, even if the defense has more holes than Swiss cheese, more holes than a glory hole. I still expect the Washington Commanders defense to look good in this game. Now, they got absolutely destroyed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield was handing out back shots, and the Commanders defense didn't do diddly squat. They had 1 sack, 37 points allowed. They took a fat L, 20-37. The Minnesota Vikings defense on paper isn't the best. They do have a great defensive coordinator in Brian Flores, who I think gets the most out of the players. Up against the Giants, it was like they were playing up against the little Giants from that movie. The Vikings won 28-6, 5 sacks, 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown from my boy Andrew Van Ginkel, and 6 points allowed. I get the Vikings defense, coaching-wise, definitely better than the Commanders, but with how bad Daniel Jones is, I am telling you, it is embarrassing to watch Daniel Jones play football. If I was a Giants fan, I wouldn't even watch. I would go to the game and throw fucking tomatoes at Daniel Jones like he is one of those people back in the day where they get in trouble and they put their head and their hands through the thing and people just launch tomatoes at him, or in a bad play, people are throwing tomatoes. I don't know why that was a thing, but I just remember that when I was younger, people used to do that, or at least maybe in cartoons. But the Commanders defense doesn't need to be good to beat down on little Danny Dimes, Danny Pennies at this point. The Commanders go to Cincinnati next week. Now, I know you might be thinking, Nick, maybe that's good, right? We saw the Bengals looked like terrible. They literally didn't look good at all. They didn't like the Bengals at all. And if they don't even figure things out in week 2, right? They come out in week 2, T. Higgins maybe misses or maybe plays, Chase is better, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they still don't look great. But if there's any team that will make the Bengals come correct, the Bengals will come back into form, it would be up against the Commanders defense. So the Commanders, even if they go up against the Giants and stonewall them, we are definitely not playing the Commanders in week number 3. Next up, we move to the Houston Texans. Now, this one is a hard pill to swallow, in my opinion, because the Texans are going up against an offense that I expected to look very good in week number 1, up against the Titans. And that is the Houston Texans going up against the Chicago Bears on Sunday Night Football. 53% rostered on Yahoo, 15.2% on ESPN, and 17.6% on NFL. Now, the Houston Texans defense got hit with the 619 Rey Mysterio. They got stabbed as many times as Julius Caesar, but ultimately, they still won the game. While on paper, the Texans had a great defense, the Indianapolis Colts and Anthony Richardson showed no mercy. Now, the Texans escape out of there with a W, but it wasn't some resounding defensive effort, right? It wasn't that the Texans defense played amazing. It was just that the Texans offense played better than the Colts offense that day. 29-27, a W for the Texans starting off the year 1-0. 2 sacks, 1 INT, and 27 points allowed up against Mr. Anthony Richardson and friends in Indianapolis. Again, while the fact that they got a 27 spot put up on them, they're still a very solid defense. It's just the Colts offense. They're in division rivals. Those types of things happen. Now, the Bears ended up winning. They win their first ever game with Caleb Williams. But it wasn't because Caleb Williams went out there like the hash slinging slasher, slicing up the defense, right? It was because the Bears defense was cracked. The Bears defense had 2 interceptions in this game, 1 fumble recovery, and not 1, but 2 touchdowns in that game. They scored 2 defensive touchdowns. Caleb Williams didn't really do anything. So this is not going to be a Caleb Williams slander, right? Where Caleb Williams is a fucking bust because he played 1 bad game, right? I'm not going to sit here and throw that narrative onto him because I don't think that's the case. I love Caleb Williams. I think he's a very talented player. I think the team will figure it out. But entering into week 2, Caleb looked a little shook. I won't lie. In my opinion, he looked a little bit nervous. He looked scared. Now, again, maybe do I know Caleb Williams? No. Do I know that's exactly how he's feeling? Of course not, but he looked a little trembly back there sometimes, and while they did escape with a W, it was not because of the offense. The Titans defense had 2 sacks, 1 fumble recovery, and 18 points allowed, though, again, they lost 17-24 because of the Bears' defensive effort. So I think the Texans defense looks to bounce back in this spot. Now, am I super confident that the Bears are just going to shit the bed every single game of the season? Eberflus and friends? No. But I do think in week number 2, bright spot, all the lights are shining on Caleb Williams. I think the Texans defense will be good enough to be worthy of streaming. Before we move on into the final defense, though, it's also important to know that the Texans play the Vikings, the cold like Minnesota Vikings, which should be a streamer-friendly matchup, depending on how Darnold looks, because Darnold carved up the Giants defense like they were the Thanksgiving turducken. But, and this is a big but, shout out to Mia Khalifa, I don't necessarily think that's the best teller, right? Because just because you speared the Giants in week 1 doesn't mean you're mono man Sam, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But before we get on into the final game, though, on the Realio, I would like to ask that if you guys have ended up enjoying this far, that you please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. It's free. And whether you are new to the channel or not, that you please make sure to leave a like on today's video. And I'd also like to give you guys a word from our partner over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, if you're new to Underdog Fantasy, you'll receive a free pick like this one on your screen right now. Aaron Rodgers higher than half of a total yard. You're going to match that with any other pick in Pick'em, and if both of them end up hitting, you'll receive 3 times your entry fee. Now, if you do end up doing multiple picks, then the payout will end up rising. Now, if you're watching this, it's Wednesday, and you're like, oh, I can't claim this Aaron Rodgers special pick. Well, you will actually be able to get a different one. It just won't be Aaron Rodgers. So if you are new to Underdog Fantasy and want to sign up, you'll receive that free pick plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy using promo code Notorious if you're a first-time depositor, or by clicking on the link in the video description. So final defense here, defense numero 5 for week numero dos. And then we have a honorable mention, but they're not really an honorable mention. It's just a defense that is available in not so many leagues, but if they were available, I actually like them better than the Chargers. So defense number 5, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Cleveland Browns. 4% rostered on Yahoo, 32.3% on ESPN, and 1.4% on NFL. Now, this week, the pickings were a little bit slim, right? We are very top-heavy this week, like Sydney Sweeney, but once you get into defense 3, right? The Commanders, it's a little bit suspect because the Commanders' defense is that good. The Texans, maybe the Chicago Bears break out and have a much better showing. The Jaguars, they're not the best defense ever, but the Cleveland Browns looked laughable on offense. Now, maybe it was just, hey, the Dallas defense is really good, which we all knew, right? The Dallas defense, week 1 at the Cleveland Browns. Tom Brady is commentating, and let me tell you, Tom Brady absolutely reeked to high heaven in that game. He had zero personality. I think Tom Brady does have a personality. He just wasn't saying anything that I couldn't have said, right? Up there. Win 33-17 in that game. 6 sacks, 2 INTs, 17 points allowed. I get, Nick, the Dallas Cowboys are one of the most elite offenses or one of the most elite defenses in the NFL. I get it, right? But the Jaguars up against the Dolphins, I thought the Dolphins were going to have a much better performance. Now, I think the reason why the Dolphins didn't really have that bigger game wasn't necessarily due to the Jags defense, though the Jags defense did play well. It was because of a couple miscues. There was a couple times where Tyreek is basically butt booty naked wide open, and Tua sails it over him, which Tua can't overthrow people. And then he overthrew Tyreek Hill, right? They just kind of weren't on the same page early, and then they got on that page as the game went along. But ultimately, the Jacks sacked Tua 3 times and 20 points allowed. They lost 17-20 as my Dolphins win. Fins for the win again and again and again, starting the season off 1-0 as per usual as we start, and then we'll probably just rumble down at the end of the season like Humpty Dumpty off that wall, but hopefully that's not the case. But the Dolphins have nothing to do with this outside of talking about the Jags defense. We are strictly streaming the Jags defense because they're going up against the Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson looks lost. You need to give Buddy a map. He is not pushing the ball down the field. That's what you want out of Deshaun Watson. Remember back in the day, this dude was fucking nasty. He was cracked. He was forcing the ball to D-Hop. He was throwing it to Will Fuller, and it was beautiful. The man had some beautiful balls paused, right? He was throwing the ball, and it was like a movie. Like, it almost looked fake how great the throw was. And now in Cleveland, he's just shook. He can't get out of it. He just looks like shit, and I don't know why. Because I've never really seen a quarterback go from looking like one of the best in the NFL to looking this trash, and it's not because of an injury. It's not like he's injured. It's not like he's gotten old. He's passing the age clip. The guy's young. He's no unk status at this point, but Deshaun Watson's days are potentially numbered as the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns if he keeps looking like that, and the Jaguars defense is good enough to put Deshaun Watson in a box and lock him up. Shout out Tyreek Hill, who also got arrested or detained prior to the Dolphins game on Sunday. Also, I'm just going to edit this in. I forgot to do it, and when I was editing the video, I noticed the other defense to talk about is the Steelers. They're actually the best defense to stream on the week, but they are owned, rostered in so many leagues that I didn't want to sit here for 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, sitting here gargling on them, metaphorically, of course. They go up against the Broncos, and the Steelers defense is one of the better ones in the league, so I think they're going to be all over Bo Nix in this game. But since their availability is very limited, I don't think most of you will be able to pick them up. But if you are, make sure you guys go ahead and pick them up because they would be the best defense to stream on the week. Thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. Make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy for that free pick, plus up to $1,000 if you're a first-time depositor in bonus cash. Make sure you guys check out one of the videos on the screen if you haven't seen them already. Stay tuned later today. We're going to be dropping the waiver wire video, and as the week goes on, we'll be dropping the start sits for every position and the rankings. Love you guys all so much. Hit that subscribe button if you're new. Whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you guys leave a like on today's video. It'd help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotriousFantasy. And if those things haven't popped up on the screen yet, make sure you check on the other videos. Love you guys so much. Have a great one. As always, good boy.